Hi everybody! Today's video is going to be a little different. I'm not going to be sitting at my desk and kind of teaching things like I usually do in my other videos. This video, I'm actually going to be meal prepping, so you are going to come along with me as I meal prep for my 25-pound corgi and my 10-pound domestic short-hair cat. And you're basically going to see everything that I do. I'm going to give you a few tips and tricks regarding meal prepping. So hopefully this will be a fun, relaxing, and educational video for you to either watch and learn, or maybe just watch to relax, or maybe you're meal prepping and you would like something just playing in the background. So let's get started. Okay, so I thought I would show you kind of one of the most, well, not the most important, but a very important part of this prep. Is this. It's just a simple plastic tablecloth. This is a nice table. Obviously I don't want to get like myoglobin all over it and stuff, so what I do is just put this over it, and it's a super simple, easy cleanup. What I do is just simply, so first tip, get a plastic tablecloth. My next tip is to get an apron. This is the one that I use. It's pretty dirty, but that means I've just been prepping a lot. You can get literally any kind of apron. It's just really helpful for when you're like chopping things. A lot can splash on you more than you realize, so it's pretty helpful. My next tip is to thaw all of your meat in a big tub or like a basin of some sort. Meat, when it's thawing, it tends to leak. This one kind of has a little crack, so there's some myoglobin that seeps out, that is seeping out, as you can see. So it's really helpful for catching any of that juice or myoglobin, which is what it is. Especially if you're thawing in your fridge, you don't want that leaking in your fridge. That's happened to me before, and it sucks. So definitely get yourself a plastic bin or basin or anything like that to thaw your meat in, either inside the fridge or outside of it, as long as you're watching the meat and making sure, you know, touching it, making sure it's still cold, and then putting it in the fridge or starting to prep, whichever you prefer. But yeah, these basins or bins, great. Something else that I recommend that I used to never use until recently is gloves. Now, I'm not suggesting gloves to be more sanitary, even though obviously that's helpful. You're going to be washing your hands a lot, so if you want to save your skin and not have your hands dry out like crazy, get gloves. If you need to wash your hands for some reason, you can just wash your gloves, or just get a new glove. So I like to just put them on and basically use both of them for the whole meal prep, and then my hands are not drying out from the constant washing. So that's the next tip. So of course, some of the main things that you're gonna need for meal prep is a cutting board, ideally one that you don't use for your other food. This is just solely for raw meal prep. You're gonna need a scale, gram scale, ounce scale. This one does both. Just something that you can kind of weigh things out, because if you're trying to follow a recipe, or if you just know that you need to feed 2 ounces of chicken neck to get your dog's bone percentage in, which is like, you know, they need 10 to 12% bone in their diet. That's what this would be for. Or if you're, you know, measuring per their body weight, for instance, if you're feeding 2.5% of your cat's body weight, you obviously need to weigh every meat out and make sure that the meal is 2.5% of your cat's body weight. And when I say meal, that would be the full day's worth of food. Of course, you will also need a sharp knife of some sort, like a sharp chef knife. So what I do is kind of get to the left side. Then I have my scale right here. And now we're gonna set up basically all the meats so I can easily grab them. So another one of my tips, I guess, is getting like, they can be cheap, just like little meal prep containers, just from Amazon or something. They're great for storing meat because it has a lid. A lot of the times I would use like plastic bags and stuff, and then they would end up leaking. So these are really good. Obviously, sometimes they can still leak a little bit, as I showed you. It has like a crack in it, but they're pretty helpful. So I recommend those. Okay, so now that I've got all the meat set out, I've got my cutting board set up, I'm going to now set up the meal prep containers. I'm gonna start with Matsu's prep. The prep containers that I use are like Pyrex glass little containers. There are a lot of different sizes, and I've just gotten them, like I've collected them over the years, but I really do love the glass ones. They're super easy to clean. They don't break like these do. I used to use plastic ones. They were okay, but they did kind of chip and break, and honestly, I just don't love using plastic if I can use glass over that, so that's what I do. So I'm just gonna set these out. So I have 15 containers. I could use a little more, like if I wanted to prep more, I could use more of these little plastic ones, but I think I'm just gonna do that 15 because I don't have a ton of meat here. I want to save some for my cat too. So what I have sitting out right now, I'm going from meaty bone to muscular organ to muscle meat to secreting organ. So I've got chicken wing drumsticks, well, more like drumettes. So basically just pieces of a chicken wing. The only thing I don't have is the wing tip in here, which I wish I did, but the butcher only had these. I also got chicken necks, which are great for my cat. Matsu is going to be mainly eating these bigger ones. Matsu is also going to be eating the chicken heads. I got these from a local farmer. Chicken necks are from a grocery store called Quality Foods. So I like to kind of get meats from different areas. It doesn't always have to be like a super nice, fancy farmer. So these are from a butcher, so they're better. These are from a farmer, so they're best quality. This is from a chain grocery store, so it's not gonna be the highest quality, but it's still good. Still raw chicken, still meaty bone, it's still real from a chicken. And then we've got ground goat right here. I also got this from the butcher just for variety. You don't necessarily, need a bunch of protein variety, but I really like to provide it if I can. So that's muscle meat. These are the meaty bones. So more muscle meat. We've got pork. This is from my local grocery store, Ingles. This was actually on sale. This is a lot of pork right here, so I'm happy about that. This is just beef meat. Also got from my local grocery store. Chicken thigh, again from my local grocery store. This is ground lamb. This is from the butcher. This is chicken heart from the local butcher. That's the muscular organ that I'm using this prep. Then for the secreting organs, I have beef liver. That is from the local butcher. And beef kidney. I could have gotten it from the local butcher, but I actually got it from my local grocery store. Some are cheaper, some are more expensive. I just kind of do what I can. Obviously, I prefer the butcher and the farmers, but sometimes it's just easier to get it from the grocery store. Okay, let's start prepping. So the first thing I do is put out the meaty bone into each meal prep container. So I do know how much my dog needs now. If I didn't, I would do a few calculations to figure out how much bone I needed, which you can figure out how to do that in a few of my videos. But for now, I'm not going to teach you any math. I'm just going to start prepping. So I know that Matsu needs, if I'm going to be feeding chicken neck, he needs about 2, sometimes 3, but I'm not going to be, super crazy about it. So I just do 2 in every few container. So I'm gonna skip a few, put 2 in there, skip a few, put 2 in here. And again, these prep containers are Matsu's full day's worth of food. So now I'm gonna move on to the chicken heads. I only thawed 3 of them, just because they're a lot of bone. They're a little bit more bone than he would need each day, but that's okay. So I'm going to just scatter them. Yes, the feathers can still be on there. Yes, the beak can still be on there. They're easy to break. He chews through them very well. And the feathers actually act as a natural fiber source as long as they're stuck to the skin and can move through the digestive tract without getting stuck. So feathers are great. Fur and feathers are a great fiber source. So I really love to feed heads. Heads also include 2 secreting organs, the brain and the eyes. So heads are like awesome. They're some of the best meaty bones you can feed. So now I'm gonna add a few chicken wings. So I got the wingettes. Matsu usually needs, he can have 2 wingettes. That's a little bit more bone than he needs, but you can kind of even it out. Like, you know, some days it can be a little less bone, some days it could be a little more bone. So that's what I'm basically doing. So I'm gonna do the wing drumette, just a single in a few of them. Maybe I'll do a neck and a drumette. Again, like this is, I usually teach you guys with, you know, math and doing calculations to make sure it's perfect. I'm showing you right now, this is what I do. And it's because I'm more comfortable with what I feed. I know how it'll be for my dog. I know what might be low and what might be a little high. So I can kind of even it out throughout the whole prep because not every meal has to be perfect. So we'll do a wingette and a neck. Then maybe we'll do 2 more necks in this one. So we've got all the meaty bones in the prep containers now. So the next thing I'm gonna do is weigh out the secreting organs. Secreting organs are very concentrated in nutrients. Like for instance, liver is very high in vitamin A. And if it's beef liver or something like that, it's very high in copper. So I don't wanna feed too much of that. So I am a little more careful about how much I'm feeding each day. So what I do is get like one of these little lids, set it on here. I tear my scale to make sure it says 0. And then I get my liver. I usually do the liver first. And then I just cut little tiny pieces. Kind of eyeballing the size, but I know that Matsu needs about 0.3 to 0.5 ounces of liver. That would be fine. So I just kind of weigh it out on here and then I put it in his bowl. So yes, I do get a little more technical with this, but again, I kind of just, you know, you don't want to feed too much, not only because of the nutrients being a little too high, but also secreting organ meats can loosen your pet's stool. So obviously don't want that. So we want to make sure we're not feeding too much. So something that you could do that I know a lot of raw feeders who are more seasoned in prepping do a lot is kind of weighing out the entire organ and seeing how much that is and then dividing that between days. For instance, if Matsu needs 0.3 ounces of liver a day and I have like 2 pounds of liver, I can kind of gauge how many days that would be. So that's something you can do as well. And you don't necessarily have to like even weigh it out like I am. You could just kind of spread it out between those multiple days and your dog will be getting the amount of liver that they need within a 15-day, for instance, period. Just some days may be more or less than another. Okay, so I'm done with the liver. Next, we're gonna do the kidney because that is the second secreting organ that we're gonna be adding to this recipe. So I basically just do the same thing. Kidney actually, it's not gonna be as concentrated in certain nutrients as, for instance, liver is super concentrated in vitamin A and copper. Kidney is, I mean, it's relatively high in iron, relatively high in B vitamins. Kind of, it provides some copper. But ultimately, it's not like crazy high in anything. So it is recommended to feed a little bit more of the second secreting organ. than you do the liver, just because of that. They're not going to be as crazy concentrated. Besides spleen is very concentrated in iron. So I usually give matsu around 0.6 ounces, maybe a little bit more. I don't make it super perfect. Like sometimes it'll be 0.7. Usually if it is on the higher end, I'll put it in a container that has a little bit more bone, so I can even out the bone to organ meat percentage so the stool can remain firm. But if I do something that's like 5 or 6, I'll add that to something that's a little less bone. And for instance, the chicken head that I have, I mentioned it does contain some secreting organ. It contains brain. So I won't put much kidney in there. It wouldn't be harmful if I did, but it's just kind of not super necessary. I'm not saying that brain and kidney provide similar nutrients, because they definitely don't. But it's just another secreting organ that's already being provided. I'm just kind of saving the kidney for other containers that don't have any. So, and this is beef kidney, if I didn't mention that already. And a lot of you mentioned the white stuff in the middle, and you're like, what the heck is this? And do I include it with the kidney? Like, do I weigh it out with the kidney? And the answer is, I would not. This is called suet. It's a very high quality form of fat, and I do recommend feeding it, especially if your pet is high energy or you need to bring up the calories or fat in the diet. Suet is great, but it does not count into the second secreting organ, so I would not count its weight as part of the kidney. Okay, so hopefully I have enough for my cat. So next we're doing the muscular organ, which is the heart. I have chicken hearts. If I run out of them for some reason, I'll use beef heart, because I also have that thought as well. I like muscular organs like heart to take up around 15 to 25% of the diet. Again, I'm gonna be eyeballing. If you want precise, I have other videos where I tell you how to do that precise. But I do eyeball Matsu's prep and Tangi's prep. I do weigh it at the end, just to kind of get a gist of how much I might be feeding. But as far as like the ratios and amounts that I feed, I do know that around 4 to 5 hearts would be good. 3 to 5 actually. Sometimes it's only about 3 if they're bigger, but. And chicken hearts are perfect because they're a good size. You can just plop them in there, and usually you don't really have to cut them up. I actually may end up having to get the beef heart out. I do still have some chicken hearts for Tangy, but I'll probably have to put some beef heart in his prep too. Okay, so next we're gonna do the muscle meat. And I just kind of even it out. I just pull a little from each one. So we've got, again, chicken, lamb, pork, beef, and goat. So I just take a little bit. I need to be mindful of how much I take, because I don't have much of the lamb and goat, and I obviously want to save some for Tangy. And I also am very mindful of the fat content of each thing that I'm feeding. So chicken hearts, they do have some fat on it. The lamb and the goat has a little bit of fat, as you can see. The chicken necks don't have too much fat, there's a little bit. Of course, those secreting organ meats don't have any fat. So I would say this is kind of on the leaner side unless I'm feeding this fatty part of the pork. So I'm gonna try and add in some of the chicken fat to Matsu's meal. Fat is an essential nutrient. I mean, they need it, that's their main energy source for canines and felines. So I'm not gonna skimp on the fat. And there, this has some fat on it. There's some marbling, so I'm gonna include a little bit. But it just depends, If I'm feeding a super fatty cut, then I'll feed more leaner cuts of the other muscle meat. Right now, again, I'm just eyeballing. What I'm gonna do is just kind of, pour it out. And it's unfortunate because they all weigh different, so I have to kind of pour everything out and then weigh it again. So I make that 0, put everything back in, see what the weight is. We're at 10 ounces. That's usually the amount that he usually needs. So we're at perfect 10 ounces. So now we're just going on and adding more to the other prep containers. So, and again, I'm just adding in a little bit of pork, a little bit of beef. This prep container has some chicken wings, so it has skin and fat on it. So I will be mindful feeding a little bit more leaner muscle meat cuts here. Not making it too fatty unless Matsu was, for instance, I don't know, doing agility that day or doing a hike. I would maybe add a little bit more fat than usual, but on an average day, I just try to keep the fat a little bit minimal. So this is probably the most tedious part. You know, this is at 9.3 ounces. I'm kind of good at gauging how much I need to put in there, but you know, I want to make sure. So you may be wondering like what nutrients are provided in what meat. So as I mentioned before, liver is very high in copper and vitamin A. It's also pretty high in iron. Kidney, I already mentioned, pretty high in B vitamins, relatively high in iron, but B vitamins are the biggest thing that provides. Lamb and goat, they're gonna be somewhat similar to beef. They're gonna be high in zinc. They're gonna be high in a little bit of iron and copper, but zinc is the main thing. Of course, fat, fatty acids, like ALA, we're gonna have a little bit of omega-3s if it's a grass-fed or pasture-raised animal. Pork is super high in B vitamins as well, super high in specifically thiamine, which is a B vitamin that not a lot of other meats are very high in. So that's a good one. It's gonna be high in vitamin D, which is unique to pork, and specifically if it's a pasture-raised pig. If it's not pasture-raised, then the vitamin D is gonna be lower. But the fat in the pig is, it can hold that vitamin D from the sun, so that's awesome. 10 ounces. Of course, the meaty bones are gonna provide calcium and phosphorus and magnesium. And a little bit of sodium too. I mean, there's a lot of minerals in bone, so. And then hearts are particularly high in B vitamins, iron. And then chicken is gonna be not as high in a lot of minerals, but it's gonna be high in the fatty acid, linoleic acid. Dogs need that. And it's just, you know, a leaner meat. So if you don't wanna feed a lot of red fatty meats, not that they're all gonna be fatty, but if chicken and turkey are gonna be good light meat proteins that are a little bit more lean. And I am saving this fattier pork for my cat, just because cats also need a little bit more fat than dogs do, just naturally. So I will leave that fattier cut for him. So I'm getting a little low on the beef, so I might just save this. I have a few meals left, but I'm gonna save this for Tangy so he can have some beef too. So I'm gonna be mainly focusing on the pork and chicken now. So now I'm gonna add in the few things to help balance the meal as far as, well, not necessarily balance as far as nutrient ratios, because that can differ. And I'm not gonna be crazy about the nutrient ratios other than the calcium and to phosphorus, which I basically am getting right with the amount of bone that I'm feeding. But what I'm gonna do is make it nutritionally complete. So there are some nutrients in here that are a little low, and I'm gonna show you what I'm gonna use to provide those. Okay, so what I have here is oily fish. So we've got sardines, canned sardines in water, and we've also got pink salmon. So I'm gonna swap between these two. I'm gonna just go like one meal I'm gonna do salmon, one meal I'm gonna do sardines. I'm just gonna swap between the two. Both of these fish are gonna be high in omega-3s, which is gonna be a little bit low in here, and also vitamin D, which is also gonna be a little bit low in here because the pork is probably not pasture raised. I got it from the grocery store. So these fish, they can be fed canned in water or cooked or raw. And these will provide omega-3s and vitamin D. Something else that I have that is very special, which is very hard to get. These are chunks of beef thyroid, which is, technically it's pretty difficult to get beef thyroid. I got it from a place online called Frankie's Free Range Meats. So it does not take a lot. This is going to provide iodine, which is going to be a little bit low in this recipe. It's going to be provided a little bit through organ meats and through fish, but it's not going to be as high. So it really doesn't take much from the thyroid gland to provide enough iodine. Basically, I'm going to be adding 2 this whole prep, and that's going to be enough iodine for my 25-pound corgi. So beef thyroid, highest item you're ever going to find in iodine, so definitely worth it to get. But if you cannot source beef thyroid, you can also use dulse, which is a type of seaweed. You can also use kelp. It's not my favorite because of how insanely concentrated in iodine it is, and also it can be high in heavy metals, but that's what we're going to do today. I also want to mention that vitamin E is also low in here, which I usually provide the day of, just because I usually provide it through vitamin E oil, like a natural vitamin E oil, and oil does oxidize when exposed to oxygen. So if I added it now, it would kind of just oxidize and not be great. So I add that at mealtime. And another nutrient that's going to be a little low in this recipe is going to be manganese. I do have a few blue mussels that I used last prep for manganese. Mussels are very high in manganese, but I didn't get any more this time, and I also don't have any green tripe, which is something that's also very naturally high in manganese. So I'm not gonna sweat it. I'm gonna add a few like throughout Matsu's meal, and I'm just gonna add manganese drops to Tangy's meal because I do have manganese drops as well. So that's what I'm gonna do to provide some of the nutrients that are a little low. So I'm going to do the beef thyroid first because they're frozen and I don't want them to freeze together. Just takes this little tiny bit. I'm gonna put it in, let's see which one. One of the smallest meals right here. And I'm gonna do another one in one of the biggest ones. So I kind of just know which container it's in. I don't wanna feed them too close together. So I'm gonna here. Then I'm gonna scatter a few of these mussels. It doesn't take much to provide, you know, Matsu with the amount of manganese, usually just 1 or 2 of these, but you know, I don't have enough for the entire prep, so I'm just gonna do 1 in every few container. A little is better than nothing. And then I'm going to put these canned fish in a container so it'll be easier for me to grab them. So I do take out the little spine segment in the salmon if I do see it. It is cooked bone, so I don't really love the idea of feeding that just because cooked bone can potentially splinter. You know, it's really small. It's also very crumbly, so I don't think there would be an issue with feeding it, but I just remove it just because I'd rather do that. And the sardines, I think they're basically deboned, and if they're not, I really can't see anything in there. So basically, you've got salmon, we've got sardines. So I just grab a little bit. It usually only takes about 0.4 to 0.5 ounces for my dog to cover his needs for vitamin D and omega-3s. So I just kind of, again, eyeball it, trying to get you guys to be more just relaxed with making raw meals. I know I can make things a little complicated seeming and kind of scary sometimes, so I'm sorry about that. I just kind of want you guys to know what you're doing, but I don't want you to feel overwhelmed. So hopefully this prep helps you in some way. And salmon, you know, adding mussels, fish, thyroid, it doesn't really count into the muscle meat or anything. Like, a lot of people wonder, does this count into the muscle meat portion? Does this count into the secreting organ meat portion? It's just kind of an extra, so just treat it as an extra, basically. That is basically everything for Matsu's prep. So I'm going to put the lids on and then put everything in the freezer except the meal that I'm going to feed him tomorrow. Okay, so we have everything put together and, you know, the lids are on, so we're gonna put this into the freezer. I'm gonna have one meal staying in the fridge, and then we're gonna move on to Tangy's prep. Okay, so now it's time to prep for Tangy. I use these little glass containers. I think they're for baby food, but they're perfect for the amount of food that he gets. He usually gets around, I usually pay more attention to the calories, but it's usually around 4 ounces of food normally. And luckily all of these weigh the same, so I can just kind of weigh one and then just eyeball everything and then weigh them all and just put a little bit more muscle meat if one's too low, or take some out if it's too high. So that saves me some time. So the meaty bone that Tangy's getting is the neck, just because I don't have wing tips. Those are small, but I don't have those. So the smallest thing I can give him for now is the neck. And the necks of, you know, any animal are gonna have some residual thyroid hormone in the flesh, just because the thyroid is right there on the neck. And the thyroid is what has a lot of iodine, which is why I was feeding beef thyroid. So when I'm feeding neck, I try to feed a little bit less iodine just because of that. So I'm probably just gonna put like one little beef thyroid in Tangy's entire prep, and that's about it. Tangy doesn't love to chew whole meaty bone, nor does he need an entire neck each day, so I just kind of chop it up into little segments. Still big enough for him to chew it, but not too big to where he's like, I don't know what to do with this. Next, I'm gonna do the liver. Tangy really just needs like 0.1 ounce. So I usually just can eyeball 0.1 ounce, so I don't even really measure it out. It's just like the tiniest little bit. And now it's time for the kidney. Again, hopefully I have enough. Kidney is one of Tangy's favorite secreting organs, actually one of his favorite parts of his entire meal. So he is very excited to see me cutting this right now. Look at that, Kiki. All right, now it's time for the heart. I do have some beef heart here that I'm going to use once I run out of those chicken hearts. It's already cut up for me, so that's great. Heart is very high in taurine, which is an amino acid that cats in particular need in their diet. I mean, taurine is in all muscle meat and, you know, any meat basically, but it's very high in heart. So heart is always a great thing to add to a cat's meal. Okay, and now that I did the heart, I'm going to start adding in the muscle meat. Another hack that I have for you, or tip, is to prep with meat that's slightly still frozen. It's a lot easier to cut it that way. If it's fully thawed, sometimes it's like really soft and smushy and it's hard to kind of cut. But when it's frozen, it just kind of cuts really easy. So around this time, when I'm putting in the last muscle meat, I usually empty one of the containers, tare, make sure it's 0, then I put everything back in, and then I just add that last muscle meat until it kind of reaches about the amount that I usually feed Tangy. Now, you know, it depends on what meats that I'm feeding, whether or not like it'll meet his perfect caloric intake or not. But usually I kind of just averages that way. So no, I'm not counting calories perfectly, but again, with practice and time, you kind of know like how much is kind of providing the amount of calories your pet needs, and you know, just monitoring their weight every few weeks is really all it takes to make sure you're doing things right. Okay, so next I'm gonna add in the meal additions. I did a pretty good job with this prep. I really only have this much pork left. All the other muscle meats I used up. I do have a little bit of liver left, not much kidney, just the fat. And I do have some beef heart left over, so I'm gonna save that. And as far as the meaty bones, yes, I do have some drumettes that are left. And I do have some chicken necks that are left as well. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is add in the fish to provide some vitamin D and omega-3s to the meal. And again, I have a little bit of salmon left still, and I've got a lot of sardines. So I'm just gonna kind of give the amount that I know Tangy would need, which is about like 0.3 to 0.4 ounces. I even give a little bit more just because he really loves oily fish. And it's not gonna hurt him, to provide a little bit more. Okay, so I do have a little bit of sardines left over, so I'm of course just gonna save that with the rest of them that I'm saving. And then there's one more thing that I'm gonna add to Tangy's prep, and that is the manganese drops. Some of the iodine will be in the chicken neck, and of course some will be in the fish as well. So there's some iodine in the meal, but I am just adding in one little thyroid. And then for the manganese drops, it really just takes like 2. These are liquid, like water-based, so they do not oxidize when exposed to oxygen like vitamin E or fish oil would. Okay, now I'm just gonna add the lids, put everything in the freezer except one, and I'm gonna put that one in the fridge. All right, so we've got all of these closed up. We're gonna put them in the freezer, except one of them, and then we're gonna clean up. Okay, so we've kind of got a mess here. Not as bad as sometimes, but I'm going to start closing up these containers. Gonna wipe them down a little bit because they've got some stuff on them. And I'm also gonna put some of these other meats in containers as well, so I don't have to bag them. Bags are not only just like a waste, but they leak like I mentioned before, so I just like these containers. So we're gonna put the chicken necks in here. Okay, and with this trash, I'm just gonna bag it, like probably double bag it, and then put it out in the outside trash because it may start to smell. I'm also gonna wipe up this area just to get some of the meat chunks off the table, and that'll make it easier to clean in a second. Clean up a little bit of the myoglobin that's spilled. Just make it less disgusting when I'm actually wiping it with something that's cleaning it. Also wanna get some of the meat chunks and skin and stuff off the cutting board. So I'm gonna rinse that off, clean it, and then put it in the dishwasher. And I pretty much put everything that I use in the dishwasher, but I try to rinse it off pretty well before I do that so there's not chunks everywhere. And then next I just clean off the surface with, this is a more natural cleaner called Thieves. I also like to use antibacterial soap and warm water, so I do both, but right now I'm gonna do the Thieves. And just spray it everywhere, all across the tablecloth. And by the way, this scale is only used for meal prepping for the animals. This scale is not used for human food, so that's also something I wanted to mention. Have a dedicated, everything for meal prep so you don't have to deal with any cross-contamination. And then the last thing that I do is I note down everything that I have. I'm gonna put all this back in the freezer. It's only been thawed for a day maybe, so it's totally fine to put back in the freezer. And as long as it stays frozen, I can bring it back out for next prep and it'll still be fine. So I'm gonna note down everything that I have here so I know what I need to buy and what I need to not buy because I already have it. Okay, and prep done. Now I know there's a lot of things that I probably could do better. I'm not saying I'm the best meal prepper, I'm not the most efficient meal prepper out there. So I would like to know from you guys, like, what would you suggest for me? What do you usually do during your meal prep that you may think is either a time saver or just really efficient? So I'd love to know from you guys. If you could let me know in the comments how you prep. If you have any tips for me, I'd love to hear it. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you liked this video, and I'll talk to you soon.